Welcome to our Playwell podcast. My name is Sherry Morgan and I am the Director of Projects at Play Scotland, the national organisation for play. Today our Chief Executive, Marguerite Hunter-Blair, speaks to Amy Woodhouse, the Chief Executive of Parenting Across Scotland. Amy became Chief Executive of Parenting Across Scotland in October 2023, and she is also a Churchill Fellow. Her fellowship focused on national approaches to improving children and young people's access to hobbies, learning from the experiences of Finland and Iceland. I hope you enjoy their conversation. Welcome, Amy, to Play Scotland's podcast series. Absolutely thrilled to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Now, Amy, I've known you quite a while, and I always think of you as a policy person in the children's sector because you worked for children in Scotland for a while. And I was always really impressed that you worked across so many policy areas. In Play Scotland, it's a bit easier for us. We have a big focus on play and children's play and a lot of narrative around that. But you were across many policy areas, and that was very impressive. And we were delighted when you joined us, actually, in the campaign we had for the new Planning Act back in 2019 with Scottish Alliance for People and Places. And that came to a very nice, successful conclusion, as we know, with legal duties for children, children's participation in planning. And I wonder what you think the highlights were of your time in policy making and strategic policy planning.
Oh gosh, that's a big question. And you're right. That was one of the things I found when I came to Children in Scotland was that there was really no policy area that didn't impact on the lives of children and families. So it was quite a challenge knowing where to focus. But I think I very quickly learned that if you took a child rights lens to policy, that really helped at least steer you in the right direction and focus what really was most important to children and families and what mattered to them. And so my job really in Children in Scotland was to make sure that we were building our policy work around what our members had to say, around what the evidence had to say, but really about what children and families felt was the most important things in their lives. And so it was around poverty, it was around mental health, and for children, it was around their education and increasingly around the climate as well. So that really gave me the steer for where I should be focusing my work and the team's work. One of the personal highlights, I think, for me was in the Year of Young People, which was 2018, we managed to get some funding to put on a First Minister's Question Time with children and young people, where we got 100 children in the room with the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon as it was then, and grilled her with a whole load of questions that they came up with. And I think that was just a brilliant example of how articulate, insightful and challenging children and young people can be if you give them the opportunity to have a say and question those in power. And it was a really helpful and instructive process for me as well in terms of following up on what they asked as well to try and see that it wasn't just a one-off, but actually could we use this as the basis of longer term change. And we got some successes and some things we didn't manage to be successful on. And that is part of the policy job as well, is realising it's a long game, isn't it? You know, some things you have to keep on being persistent over many, many years to make you feel progress in. So the Planning Act was a nice moment of achievement when we did get children and young people's voices included in the legislation.
It was great. And I think you're right. You look back and it takes a generation, I think, to actually maybe get the policy change that many of us campaign for. I don't know how long it's going to take us to get the implementation change. Mm-hmm. It's thankfully coming now in Scotland. And I know you played a key role as well in the campaign for incorporation of children's rights into Scots law. So you must be thrilled at the developments this year.
Oh, definitely. I think we're all thrilled, aren't we? And relieved as well, because it's felt like it's been a long process to get us here. And I remember the excitement of when the bill first got passed and we were all jubilant and celebratory. And then there was a few setbacks after that we had to work through. So it was a wonderful moment when we were in Parliament, when the bill finally got, the amended bill finally got passed and we're now in the process of building up to it actually being enacted in July, I think, isn't it? So it's not long to go now, only a few months. It's really exciting in terms of what that'll mean for children and families. And I'm a parenting across Scotland now, as you know, and I'm really fortunate to be building on the work of Claire Simpson, who was the previous chief executive at PAS and did such a lot of work to really talk insightfully about how parents are advocates for their children's rights and how the UNCRC incorporation is a really good thing for families as a whole. It's great for children, of course, predominantly, but children exist mostly within the context of families. So ensuring that children's rights are met means that the needs of families should be met as well. So it's really exciting for my new job too, in terms of what that means. It should mean that families are living free from poverty, safe, nurtured, have enough to eat, live in good quality housing, children have access to play and live in good health. If it's done properly, then it should be transformational for families' lives in Scotland.
I think you're so right. And that concept, even of transformational change for children and young people, as you say, can't happen without families, parents and carers. And it's so interesting to hear that you've gone to parenting across Scotland, because at this time in particular, I think because it is a huge challenge, this implementation of children's rights. And we are very aware in the play sector that we talk sometimes about the biggest barrier to children's play can be parents, which also means that the biggest opportunity for children's play is with the parents. And I think this will be the same when we start to look at full implementation of children's rights in Scots legislation, in Scots law, that parents have the key role here. And this is not to make you feel a lot of pressure on your shoulders, Amy. I just wondered what your key priorities, maybe the top 3 priorities that you've been thinking about, framing your work plan around, what might they be at the moment?
Yeah, I'll tell you that. I'm also really interested when you say that parents are one of the barriers to play. If you could tell me a little bit about that, because that's disappointing, I guess. So it would be good to understand a wee bit more about that, so we can think about that within PAS too.
Yeah, well, I think in Play Scotland, and I would say this as a parent who's been completely guilty of this as well, is that we worry a lot about our children's safety. And there's no doubt about it. It is a fact. There's much more traffic on the roads now than there ever has been. I think that we've got much more awareness about maybe predatory people, out and about, and our children, how they might manage themselves. I'm not sure that children today get the same experience of being autonomous individuals in the public realm. We tend to accompany them or drive them or take them places and maybe over supervise them a bit. So I think as parents, we need to be more proportionate in how we support our children to become independent, take risks and experience a wide range of play opportunities that may result in minor injuries, cuts and a minor broken bone. We did veer in Scotland towards a cotton wool culture, and I think we can look round us and see why that's happened. So I think what we need is for parents to have courage and confidence now to let children experience and explore play opportunities and proportionate risk taking in the play environment as well. So I think we are the gatekeepers, parents are the gatekeepers, I think, at start as to what children get to experience. And I think there's a lot of work to be done with parents and families about how we manage our own behaviours to support children's better experiences and opportunities.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And it's made me think I'm doing an incredibly exciting consultation response with Aaron and the team at the moment around statutory guidance for the UNCRC implementation for public authorities. And one of the aspects of that guidance is about evolving capacity of children and, well, how, in this case, public authorities manage that in terms of their engagement work with children. But it's also something as parents that we have to be really mindful of, in that as our children grow and develop, our relationship with them develops and yeah, we are much less responsible for their lives, and that can be a real challenge. I mean, I'm a parent myself of a 15-year-old, so I'm going through quite a lot of that at the moment myself too. And having that trust, I guess, the trust in play, I suppose, is what you're talking about, isn't it? And that can come with risks, but we can't prevent our children from being, we try and mitigate the risks to the best of our abilities, but navigating risk is all part of growing and evolving as humans. So yes, it is really important, and something that parents do need to learn and feel confident about, and talk to other parents about as well, and work their way through it. So yes, I totally get that, understand that.
I think there's a concept of the competent child, and I think right from maybe even from nursery in Scotland, traditionally going through then into early primary and beyond, we've sought to minimise that concept away and see children as almost receptacles of information and knowledge to be learned and applied. And we've veered away from this idea that children are innately competent, confident, physically, with great physical skills, with good mental ability, and to assess and manage risk. And rather than build on that natural innate ability, I think sometimes as parents we rush to do, I know I'm talking now from personal experience, rush to do it for them. And then when they do present as, oh, I managed to do this, we act completely shocked and surprised. So I think there's a long journey for us ahead as parents, because the instinct for some people in society with children's rights might be to say, oh, with rights comes responsibilities, rather than with rights come opportunities. And this idea that children are going to tell the adults what to do. So I think it's really important that we very early on try and frame all of this in the positive way that it actually is. It's just about a very positive thing, and will actually help all of us to support the next generation to be competent, independent, autonomous, and reach their potential, which is what we want for them all, really.
UNCRC incorporation, there's a need for good positive messaging to support parents to see it as a thing that's positive for them and their families. And we were thinking about equal protection as being another example of a bit of legislation that received a bit of negative attention at the time, but we worked really, really hard to frame that as about giving children the same protection that adults enjoyed, and not about taking things away from parents. And we won that argument really convincingly. And I think this is another example where I feel confident we will do the same as well, in that parents will see this as a good thing. Because I know from my work around additional support for learning, for example, how much parents have to battle on behalf of their children in order for them to try and get the support that they need within schools so that they can get the education to which they're entitled. And that's parents advocating for their children's rights right there. So this will be something that they can see and they can hold on to as something that's going to help them. And that's the messaging that I'm really keen to get out.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that parents understand that this is a support for them and families, and actually respecting children's rights and having a culture that acknowledges children's rights actually makes it a better society for all of us to live in. And I know we talk about that in the play sector. Gilles Penaloza, former mayor of Bogota, talks about if a city is fit for an 8-year-old and fit for an 80-year-old, it's a really good place for everyone in between. And I think looking at society in the whole, a holistic approach to society makes us realise that the very start of that has to be children's rights, because that actually supports all our rights in the community. And I think that's really important to be the progressive society that we want to be. And definitely when we look back at progressive legislation that we've had, we can see that it does contribute to a positive culture for children and young people and parents. And we sometimes wonder, a bit like seatbelt legislation and others, wow, how did we manage without that? Because it's made such a big difference to people's lives. So Amy, you're in a fantastic new post at the moment at Parenting Across Scotland. Can you tell me now about your priorities going forward?
Yeah, Parenting Across Scotland, it's a national membership organisation. It's been around for 20 years actually now, and it works to create a Scotland where all parents and families are valued and supported to give children the very best possible start in life. And it works to influence national policy on that. So and we have a number of priority areas which we've been working in for quite a few years. So child poverty is a really important one. It's the basis of quite a lot of the other things that we do in terms of ensuring that families have enough money, positive living environment in order to bring up their children. Family support is another big area for us. We've worked quite a bit on how parental support can be built within early learning settings, for example, and we're hoping to do a bit more work on that this year with Midlothian Sure Start and Open University and Children in Scotland, learning from Nordic countries and their experiences. We have another focus on leisure and play, and I'll talk a bit about my hobbies work in a bit. And really it's about building up the children's sector and practitioners' skills, knowledge and experience and how they can work in ways that support families as well. So we've got various different events that hopefully be coming out throughout the year that practitioners can take part in. We're really small. There's only 2 staff and we have a board as well as our members. So I have to try and be, sensible and not be overly ambitious, but we do have great opportunities and influence beyond our size, which gives us hopefully the chance to make some good positive change for families. That's the plan anyway.
I think it's so important at this point in time because a bit like the legislation on new NCRC into Scots law, it isn't just changing practices and provision, it's about culture change as well, isn't it? And I think sometimes when we do go abroad and we see other cultures, sometimes we do wonder, do we really value our families and children as much as we could? And I wonder what you think about how we bring about maybe some more positive culture change in Scotland.
Yeah, that does make me think that it starts at home as well, no pun intended. So within Parenting Across Scotland, what we're doing is we're really looking at how we involve the lived experience of parents and families in our own organisation. So we've got plans over the next year to set up a parenting lived experience forum that's going to help us shape the direction of the organisation. So I think that should give us greater legitimacy in terms of encouraging others to do likewise. And we're deliberately using the term parenting rather than parents because it's broader and it includes everybody that takes on a parenting role, including, kinship carers, for example. So we'll definitely be doing that. We've also got a report coming out, hopefully within the next month or so, which gathers together all the research about parents' lives that was published in Scotland over the last year, which sounds like, well, it's only a year, how much can there be? But the team that have been doing the work for us found around 50 bits of published research about parents' lives in Scotland last year. It's amazing. There's evidence out there that we can use to influence change. So it's not always about doing new engagement work, but it can be about how we use what parents have already told us and been telling us over many years.
I think that's so important, Amy, because we did something similar in Play Scotland. We're about to launch on yet another survey and finding out what people think, and we suddenly stopped and thought, well, let's look at what we actually know already and what children, young people and families have actually told us already and what peer-reviewed research has already told us already, and use that to frame, the key messaging going forward. So I think that's interesting. We're doing the same. I think it's also really interesting what you're talking about, the lived experience model there of parenting and parents. And I think that's something that a lot of organisations who want to be more family friendly would welcome guidance on that type of model to be introduced, because we don't want to operate in a vacuum here. We want to operate from lived experience. And I think, nowadays there's greater value given to lived experience, views of people and young people than perhaps there was previously. I know you're quite a playful person yourself. I heard recently that you play the guitar and you're in a band and you're really interested in art. And so I'd really like to know about what you were doing with the Churchill Fellowship, because that's such a prestigious thing to be involved in. I think the last person I knew was involved in that was Tim Gill. And that was really interesting what he was looking at. So could you tell us a bit about that and what you learned from it and how you're taking some of your recommendations forward?
Yeah, so the Churchill Fellowship, if people aren't aware of it, it does come from the Winston Churchill legacy, and it exists to support people with a particular interest in a particular policy or practice area to go and learn about it in other countries and bring that learning back to the UK. So it's a brilliant thing, and it funds people to go all over the world and do all sorts of different things and learn about all sorts of different topics. And I was fortunate to get one last year to go to Finland and Iceland to explore those countries' national approaches to increasing children and young people's access to hobbies. So hobbies is kind of my hobby, if you like, in that it's just something I've been interested in for many years. So I started off my career as a mental health researcher, and through that work, I did, a bit of work around how the arts impact on mental health. And there's really strong evidence that participative arts in particular are brilliant in lots of different ways, and for children, but for adults as well, for everybody, regardless of their age. So they're great for, learning new skills, building confidence and self-esteem, making connections, building friendships. They put you into this fantastic psychological state of flow, which is when you're absolutely absorbed in an activity and you're forgetting about the whole world outside, you're forgetting about your worries, you're forgetting about your to-do list, you're just absorbed in the activity. And that is just a brilliant state to be in for mental health and well-being. So I knew this, and I guess with my work at Children in Scotland, I became aware that not all children in Scotland can take part in a hobby. Cost is a significant barrier, but also where you live. If you live in a very rural community, and children with disabilities as well, not all, and other additional support needs, there are barriers in place which prevent some children from taking part in these brilliant activities that are so good for you. And again, a few years ago, I was in Finland, luckily enough, with work on a peer learning exchange about youth mental health. And there was somebody there presenting from the Finnish government, and they were talking about the hobby guarantee, which they were bringing in at that time, which was about how Finland can make sure that all children and young people can take part in hobbies. And I just thought it was just such a brilliant idea. It made such a lot of sense. And, with my mental health background, I thought, wow, if you could invest in hobbies, that could give children so much. It could really help prevent the deterioration of mental health that unfortunately we've been seeing for many years in Scotland amongst children and young people. I mean, it's really stark. If you look at the figures, as children age, their mental well-being goes down. I mean, it's and you see it particularly in the teenage years, and particularly with girls as well. And we've known it for years. We've known that children and young people's mental health services have been insufficient and too late. You need to be too unwell before you get access to them. We need something at a scale that's going to actually improve the well-being of our children. And that's where the Finnish model comes from. The Finnish model comes from a well-being starting point. So I was really interested in that. And then through conversations with Finland, they said, well, that we went to Iceland to inform the development of our model. And I was like, oh, okay, right, I need to learn about Iceland as well. And the Iceland model has actually, I found, been around since the 90s. I mean, that's been around for a really long time. And some people in Scotland might know it through the Planet Youth programme. Yeah. So that Planet Youth programme is based on the Icelandic model. Their model comes from a bit of a different starting point because it comes from more of a risk prevention approach, I guess. So in the 90s, they had very high levels of teenage drinking, smoking, substance use. And they felt that there was a national impetus to do something about this. Their drinking levels were amongst the highest in Europe at that time. And so they developed this prevention approach that they call the Icelandic prevention model now, which involves a number of different things. It involves work with parents, it involves work with schools, and it involves leisure activities for children. And they have a leisure card scheme where an amount of money is given to every child, managed by their parents, to pay for hobbies and leisure activities. So that was really interesting to find out about that. When the opportunity came up to apply for a Churchill Fellowship, I thought, well, gives me a great chance to get a bit more evidence about how these models work in practice, with the hope that we could maybe use that in Scotland to develop something similar. So yeah, I spent 3 weeks in Finland and 3 weeks in Iceland, understanding how their approaches worked in practice, meeting hobby providers, meeting coordinators, watching children and young people take part in their hobbies, chatting to some of them if they spoke English, speaking to parents. It was an amazing, amazing experience, and I learned an incredible lot through that process.
That sounds fascinating, Amy. And I just wonder, how do countries like Finland gather the evidence then for what children would like to do?
Well, they started off by doing a national survey of all school-aged children. So the Finnish model is focused on school-aged children. And they pretty much gave them a blank sheet and said, what hobbies would you like to do? And then they've built up this list over time. And before they started that first survey, I guess they had an idea about what they thought the most popular hobbies would be. And ice hockey is the most popular sport by far, I think, in Finland. So they were anticipating that would be quite high up the list. But actually, when they got the results back, and there was, I think, about 200,000 children that took part in the survey, I know it's huge. They've got a big response rate. It's administered through schools, so I think that helps. They found that the most popular option that was selected by children was actually, in fact, parkour, which wasn't on their list at all. And their other popular hobbies that children had listed weren't really near the top either. So it was cooking and animal hobbies, which would be things like just spending time with animals, simple things actually that are not too removed from, daily life. And I thought the parkour one was particularly interesting because I was, funnily enough, in preparation for this, I was listening to some of the other podcasts, and I listened to the one with Kevin Kane. I don't know how long ago that was, but he was talking about play when he was young and how he enjoyed scrambling over all the banisters in the estate where he lived. And he said, in essence, it was parkour. And I thought, oh gosh, yeah, I mean, parkour and just play is very similar. So I thought that was really interesting that was the top choice. And kids just want to learn how to do it better and more fancily, I guess.
I know, and it's so interesting what you say. As adults, we can't help ourselves. We use the rational part of our brain to say, oh, we know what children want. We know what children like. And that's a really good example of, no, we need to ask them, because guess what? It's probably not what we're thinking at all. And we've had this argument a lot about children's play, the anxiety around them doing play sufficiency audits, and local authorities that are very cash strapped, being really worried that children are going to ask for destination parks on every road, on every area. And children don't ask for that. They're asking for simple opportunities, access to green space in and around where they live. That's what they really want. It's lovely to have the destination park. It's lovely to have themed parks, but they're not looking for that as a daily experience. So I think it's really important that we let children tell us what they want, and then we can respond to that. Just another question about that. I mean, I could talk about this all day. I know we don't have all day, but do you think the model could work in Scotland?
Yeah. So what they do in Finland is once they've got the results of what children want to do, then they have hobby coordinators in each municipality who take those results, and it's their job to then commission providers to provide them, and it's delivered in school after school. So that they have about, I think, 280 odd municipalities in Finland. So I guess that's maybe one difference in that they've got those local systems of democracy at a smaller level than we've got in Scotland. Finland's got a very similar size of population at around 5 million. But yes, that's a really, really interesting model in a way in which they go about turning children's preferences into realities. In Iceland, it's maybe a bit more of a simpler system to operate because it's this leisure card. So it's organisations that are already providing hobbies in the community can sign up to be part of this leisure card scheme, and then parents can just use that to pay for whatever the children like. So that has some advantages in it being simpler. However, it is quite expensive to run that scheme. It's more expensive to run because hobbies are quite expensive in Iceland. And so this is in essence just subsidising the cost of hobbies rather than providing new things for free. I go into quite a lot of the detail in my report, but both of the models have their advantages and the disadvantages from a Scotland perspective. And I think probably we would need to think quite carefully about how it could work within a Scottish context. I certainly feel convinced that a national model is a good way to go, I think, because we've got lots and lots of hobby available in Scotland. Many have a cost associated to them. Some are free, but it's not terribly well coordinated, and it'll be different in different parts of the country. And it might not necessarily be what children and young people want to do. So there's been quite a lot of investment in football. No shade on football. Lots of kids love playing football, but that's just one sport amongst countless. So I think there's a bit of work to be done in terms of understanding what hobby access looks like in Scotland at the moment, what funding goes where, what hobbies are available, what aren't, and then thinking about the best model for extending reach of that across Scotland afterwards. But yes, that's my hope and ambition, is that we move towards a national model building on the learning from Finland and Iceland, and making it appropriate for Scotland. Yeah.
I'm thinking now, Amy, about a George Bernard Shaw quote. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. So, Amy, we talked earlier about you being a playful person. You've got lots of lovely hobbies, and you're really interested in the arts, and you're obviously really interested in so many things around children, families, and the culture of Scotland, and how that benefits all of us, actually, whether we're at work, whether we're at home, whether we're in the community. And I wonder if you could tell us what your favourite things to do are to pass the time.
I'm one of those people that flits a bit from hobby to hobby, and I don't have one thing that's stuck with me my whole life. And I'm quite a believer in that you don't have to be particularly good at anything to enjoy it. So I quite like to get stuck into all sorts of different things and get little tasters of all sorts of different things. But maybe one of the more playful things that I'm doing this year is I've played the guitar off and on since I was 10, and I've never been terribly good at it. And it's been mostly something I've done by myself in my room, but I had a big birthday last year and I got a group of friends together as part of that, and partner and son as well. And we all brought our instruments. And some people were digging them out from dark recesses of cupboards under the stairs that hadn't been used for ages. We had a recorder there. Somebody brought their school recorder with them. Somebody brought a didgeridoo. I mean, it was a right old mishmash of instruments. And we played music together, and it was so much fun. It was hilarious, and it sounded terrible, but we had such a lot of fun, and we made an agreement that we were going to do this more regularly. So this year we've started a little band when we get together every so often and play music together. And we've got a night coming up in a few weeks and we've made an agreement that one of the songs we're going to play is You're So Vain by Carly Simon on the didgeridoo and the glockenspiel and the whatever else. So so yes, it's just fun, and it is that kind of childish, just, you know, having a laugh with your friends, you know, being creative. I mean, that's kind of what gives life a lot of pleasure.
I'm so loving to hear this, Amy, because I do think we take ourselves, our work, our lives, our duties as in families so seriously that I think fun sometimes comes last on the list, and we're not particularly playful or fun people at all. And it's just wonderful to hear that you have prioritized having fun like this in your life, and it's fantastic because I know in Play Scotland we focus a lot on young people and how important play is for them. But actually, we all need it in our lives, don't we?
Definitely. Well, you know, Marguerite, if you've got any instruments tucked away, come and join us.
I've actually got a 12-string guitar that I have really picked up. It's actually, if anyone knows me, I'm not very tall, and it's nearly as big as I am. So, yeah, when I retire, I'm going to play the 12-string guitar. That's my challenge to myself. So I might have to make it through and compete with the didgeridoo, definitely. Amy, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thank you. I really enjoyed chatting.
Thanks very much, Amy.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. To find out more about the work of parenting across Scotland or Amy's research, please see links in the episode information. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your preferred app. To find out more about Play Scotland, please follow us on X @Play Scotland and visit our website at playscotland.org.